Welcome to LV's Scary Stories, where chilling tales come to life. In today's episode, we'll delve into 3 spine-tingling Asian ghost stories shared by our audience. What makes these stories even more unsettling? They all take place right here in the United States. Turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let the fear begin. Story number 1. When I was 8 years old, my parents often dropped me and my brother, Na, off at my grandparents' house. It wasn't just the two of us. Sometimes our other young cousins were there too. They left us there so our grandparents and my uncle Nu could babysit us. At the time, Uncle Lee and his wife also lived in the house with my grandparents and Uncle Nu. Uncle Lee and his wife had 2 kids around our age, so there were always a lot of children in that big old house. Uncle Nu was the oldest sibling. He had lost his right leg during the Vietnam War and was never married. Once we moved to America, he never looked for a wife. Maybe it was because he had lost a leg, but I never really knew for sure. Uncle Nu loved playing with us kids, and we loved playing with him too. Because he moved slowly and hopped on one leg, it was hard for him to catch us during games like tag or hide and seek. We could always hear him coming because of his hopping, but when he crawled, that was when he could really surprise us. I remember one Friday, our parents took us to a funeral home to help clean and decorate for a service. I remember the adults were putting up flowers, folding paper, and organizing everything. There were 9 of us kids, and the funeral home was huge, with lots of empty rooms. Naturally, we started playing hide and seek. We played in pairs, but I didn't have a partner. I told everyone I'd play alone until Uncle Nu got there. Then I'd team up with him. Na and one of our cousins were it, so they had to come and find us. Since I was alone, I quickly ran into a room where they kept napkins, drinks, and other supplies for the funeral. I turned off the light and hid behind some boxes of soda. A little while later, I saw Na and my cousin come in. They turned on the light, looked around, and then left, turning the light off again. I stayed hidden. Then the door opened again, and I quickly ducked down, thinking it was Na and my cousin again. But this time, the light didn't turn on. I heard the sound of hopping coming toward me. Right away, I whispered, "Uncle Nu? Uncle Nu, is that you? I'm hiding over here, so don't come this way. Go find a place to hide." Then the door opened again, and the light turned on. Na and 3 of my cousins came in to search for us. According to the rules of the game, if someone found you, you had to help them find the others. When the light turned on, I saw Uncle Nu standing behind a small trash can by the wall. The trash can only came up to his waist, so he wasn't really hiding. He just stood there. Na and my cousins walked past him several times without even noticing him. When they came to where I was hiding, they found me. They told me that since I didn't have a partner, I had to help them find the others. But I insisted that Uncle Nu had just arrived and was my partner. They thought I was lying, but I wasn't. I told them that Uncle Nu had been in the room, but when we all looked again, he was nowhere to be found. The next day was the funeral. We dressed up nicely and arrived around noon. A long black car pulled up, and some of the relatives, including my father, helped carry the casket out. In our tradition, there is a specific part of the funeral where the deceased is carefully removed from the casket and placed on the floor to perform a ritual. Na and my cousins were shocked to see that Uncle Nu had died. But I wasn't shocked. I was terrified. I had seen him the day before. No wonder for the past 3 weeks, whenever we asked where Uncle Nu was, our grandparents would say he had gone to the store to buy candy or some other excuses. I didn't know what had happened or why he had suddenly passed away. Later, when I was older, I learned that Uncle Nu had died from very high blood sugar. Looking back, I think that on the day we played hide and seek, I might have seen Uncle Nu's ghost at the funeral home, there to visit before his body arrived the next day. Story number 2. I was born at just 7 months, and I guess that's why my eyesight isn't very good. My eyes are a bit unusual. If you stand about 3 feet in front of me, I can see you clearly. But as you step further back, your figure becomes blurry, and if you go far enough, I start to see 2 of you. When I was little, other kids often picked on me because of my eyesight. They would make fun of me, and I always tried my hardest to win them over as friends. Even when they disrespected me, I stayed nice to them because I just wanted to belong. We lived in an apartment complex with many other families. There were many kids in the area, and we loved playing games together. Back then, one of our favorite games was Playhouse, or any role-playing game. One day, while playing in a big field with tall grasses behind the apartment, the kids decided we should reenact a traditional funeral, like the ones we'd seen in movies. They wanted me to play the dead person. I didn't want to, but they told me that if I refused, they wouldn't play with me anymore. Reluctantly, I agreed. I laid down on a fallen tree trunk while the other kids pretended to cry and brought me flowers. Some kids couldn't fake crying and started laughing instead. Every time I tried to get up, they told me the funeral wasn't over. Then I heard some of the boys digging nearby. They said they were going to bury me. I stayed lying on the tree trunk, closing my eyes. I listened to the sound of the boys digging, but after a while, the sound started to fade, growing quieter and quieter until I couldn't hear it at all. When I opened my eyes, I realized no one was around. The field was silent. The other kids had disappeared, leaving only the dead tree and the tall grasses swaying in the breeze. I sat up, calling out for them, but no one answered. A cold breeze swept through, giving me goosebumps. I decided to walk back to the apartment, thinking they must have gone home without me. When I reached our apartment, 2 very old women in traditional funeral clothes followed me inside. I turned to look at them and was immediately frightened. Their faces were pale and wrinkled, and their presence was unnerving. Then, I heard my mother's voice. "Don't take my daughter," she said, crying. "I will go with you. It's my time to leave." My mother came out from the apartment and knelt in front of me, gently patting my head as tears streamed down her face. She told me she loved me, but it's her time to go. She said that even though she couldn't stay, she would always be my mother. Looking into my eyes, she told me they were beautiful and that I could see things others couldn't. She kissed my forehead, told me to be good to my father, and then walked out the door with the 2 old women. I stood there crying, watching them leave. I ran after her, calling, "Mom!" But when I got outside, she was gone. I woke up in my father's arms. He had just gotten back from work and found me sleeping alone in the field. He was carrying me back to the apartment. I must have fell asleep while pretending to be the corpse during our pretend funeral role play. "Don't play with those kids anymore," he said. "They're not being nice to you." I told my father about my dream. He smiled gently and asked what my mother had said. I told him she said she had to go, but loved me very much. He hugged me and carried me home. I never got to meet my mother. She passed away a long time ago. When my mother was 5 months pregnant with me, she was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. The doctors told her she needed immediate treatment, but it might cause her to lose the baby. She refused treatment until after I was born. At 7 months, they performed an emergency C-section to save me, but by then, the cancer had spread too far, and she passed away shortly after. Growing up, I only knew my mother through the pictures of her that hung all over our apartment. That's how I recognized her in my dream. For years, I always felt my mother's presence in our home. Even though my eyesight was poor, I could see a blurry figure, a woman, moving around our apartment. She never came close enough for me to see her clearly, but I knew it was her. After that dream where my mother said goodbye, I never saw her presence again. Later, my father stopped working 2 jobs so he could spend more time with me. He also took me to the doctor, where they discovered I had celiac disease, which caused a severe vitamin A deficiency. That was why my eyesight was so poor. After taking vitamins for a while, my vision improved, and I could finally see clearly. Even though I've never met my mother in real life, I miss her deeply. I'll always carry her love with me. Thank you for listening to my story. Story number 3. My name is Mary. When my mother found a new man on the internet, she moved out of state to Minnesota to be with her boyfriend. My father was always either at work or school because he was in a nursing program. He was busy all the time, but he only had 2 weeks left before completing the program. During that time, my father didn't know what to do because I was only 6 years old, and my little brother Sean was just 4. He needed someone to watch us while he worked and studied, so during the day, he sent us to live with my Aunt May and her family. Aunt May worked during the day, and her 2 sons were in middle school. They attended summer school until noon, and then came home to stay with Sean and me. Until then, it was just the 2 of us and Aunt May's husband, whom I called Uncle, in the house. Aunt May's husband tended to sleep a lot and always wake up late during the day. He usually wake up after everyone had already left to school or to work. Every morning around 6 a.m., when my dad dropped us off, Aunt May would open the door for us. She would prepare breakfast for her family and us before heading to work. While staying there, I noticed something strange. Aunt May and her husband never talked to each other. They would sit at the same table but never said a word. Even when she left for work, they didn't say goodbye. It felt like they weren't happy together or something was wrong between them. For the first 3 days, my uncle didn't do much. He just sat on the couch or went into the bedroom until his 2 sons came home from school at noon. On the 4th day, everything changed. That morning, after everyone had left, I was watching TV and fell asleep on the couch. I woke up to the sound of Sean laughing in the bedroom. It sounded like he was playing with Uncle. I could hear Uncle laughing too, as if he was tickling Sean. Then Sean ran out of the bedroom toward me, laughing, with Uncle chasing him. Uncle was acting playful, wiggling his fingers like claws. Sean hid behind me, still laughing, as Uncle came over and started tickling him. Sean was kicking and giggling so much that he jumped off the couch and ran into one of my cousin's bedrooms, with Uncle crawling after him on all 4s. I got up and went to the pantry in the dining room to look for a snack. While walking in, I accidentally kicked their nearly empty bag of rice, spilling some onto the floor. I squatted down to pick up the grains one by one. Suddenly, I heard Sean laughing again. He ran out of my cousin's bedroom and into Aunt May's room. I glanced over and saw Uncle crawling after him, still on all 4s. But then something terrifying happened. Uncle's face fell off. His face dropped to the floor, and his head was completely black. He started feeling around the floor, grabbed his face, and put it back on like it was a mask. Then he continued crawling after Sean as if nothing had happened. I froze in fear. I turned off the pantry light and sat down by the bag of rice, hugging my knees to my chest. My heart was pounding, and my eyes filled with tears. I could still hear Sean laughing and running around. A moment later, Sean came out into the living room, calling my name. "Mary! Mary!" He found me hiding in the pantry and ran to hide behind me, peeking out occasionally to look for Uncle. I told him to be quiet, but he kept laughing and calling out, "Uncle! Uncle!" I smacked him lightly on the head, telling him to stop. Just then, we heard the front door open. My 2 cousins had returned from school. That's when I finally left the pantry with Sean. Sean ran around looking for Uncle, but Uncle had stopped playing. He just came out of the bedroom, sat on the couch, and didn't say or do anything. When my dad picked us up later that day, I broke down crying and told him everything I had seen. Luckily, he had 2 days off and decided to take us to my grandparents' house during the day instead of leaving us with Aunt May's family. Years later, I learned the truth about Aunt May's husband. He had committed suicide a long time ago. According to rumors, he did something so embarrassing that he couldn't live with himself. Before he hanged himself, he used a knife to cut the side of his face. I remember attending a funeral when I was about 3 or 4 years old. At the time, I didn't realize it was a funeral, but I do recall seeing a man lying in a casket with his face covered by a black cloth. I think that man was Aunt May's husband. To this day, I still don't know what he did that was so shameful that it drove him to end his life. My cousins and my aunt have never spoken about it, and I never brought it up again. However, I often wonder if they ever noticed that Uncle was still there, lingering in the house with them. Or perhaps the one playing and chasing Sean around wasn't really Uncle anymore. It was something else entirely. That's all for this video. Thank you for making all the way through and supporting my stories. Have a wonderful day or night.